Hello, everyone, and welcome to Proto Charities Education webinar. We are so glad to have you here, and we'll go ahead and let everybody get adjusted. Feel free to be on camera, off camera. When the presentation starts, we do ask that you mute your speaker. Without further ado, here is Dr. Patno.
But this is really a joy. Welcome to everyone. Thank you for signing up to be a part of this webinar. It is exciting for me to share a little bit of information with you about how we can grow in our vocation as Catholic educators, while also trying to avoid burnout. Now, before I begin, I need to mention something to you about my voice. You will notice during the presentation that my voice at times can sound a little bit strangled or choked up. Kind of did it even right there. The reason for that is 25 years ago, when I was pregnant with our third, I had meningitis. And the meningitis nearly killed me and our unborn daughter, but by God's grace, we both survived. But the meningitis just wreaked havoc with my system. But following the birth of our daughter, who was born perfectly healthy, praise God, as my own health began to improve, I started to notice problems with my voice. The condition is called spasmodic dysphonia. And what that means is that the muscles in my vocal cords are having muscle spasms. Right there, it kind of did it. And in my case, they contract. And when they tighten, they cut off the airflow. And that's what causes my voice to sound a little bit tremulous or strangled at times. The doctors don't know if it was the meningitis that triggered it or if it just started at that moment by coincidence. But it's been 25 years, and I've often wondered, do I still need to tell people what's going on with my voice? But what I've found is that if I tell people what's happening, people have said to me, oh, as soon as you told us what was going on, I didn't even notice it anymore. But I've also had people come up to me and say, are you okay? The only thing I could focus on in your whole presentation was what's going on with her voice. Is she nervous? Is she emotional? Are you okay? So I don't want you to focus on my voice. And so now you know what's going on anyway. I do have some PowerPoint slides. And so what I'm going to do now is share my screen so you can see them. And it is my hope that I don't kill you by PowerPoint tonight. So here we go, and let's see if I can turn it into a slideshow. And what we're going to be doing is talking about Catholic education as vocation, and then living the mission while hopefully avoiding burnout. This is the direction that we're headed, just so you know what we're going to talk about tonight. We'll start with defining vocation. I'm just a big fan of defining terms. And then we will talk about how do we grow in our vocation? How do we live our vocation? And then how can we move from burnout to joy? Now, I have to tell you that 30 years ago, I did not work in education. 30 years ago, I was working in advertising at a prestigious advertising agency in downtown Minneapolis. And I will tell you, I loved it. It was a super fun job. And you can imagine, because, I was a young 20-something straight out of college, and to be able to work in the world of advertising, it was exciting. I worked with really great people. I had interesting clients. I got to travel. We won some awards. It was fun. It was really a great gig. However, I use the words job and gig intentionally because I have to admit that in my years at the agency, for as much as I enjoyed the people and the work, I don't ever remember feeling deeply fulfilled in the work that I was doing. So then fast forward 15 years, and now I was teaching high school students, and it was the end of the year, one year, the very last day of class. And a student came up to me at the end of class, and she presented me with this. I actually took a picture. I had my husband actually take a picture of me holding it today because I didn't know what you'd be able to see with the screen sharing. This is what she presented to me. And she explained to me that this is a prayer shawl, and she had knitted it for me. And she said that while she was knitting it, she was praying for me, for my family, and for the other students in our class. Well, as you can imagine, I was speechless. I could hardly believe it. And when I think about all of the gifts that I've received in my life, and this is probably true for you too, when you think of the gifts that you've received, there are some that land in a category of really just the most thoughtful. Well, without question, this lands in that category. And I knew at that moment that teaching was not just a job, that teaching was a vocation. And I knew that I desperately needed God's grace in order to serve my students well. If you look at the Catechism of the Catholic Church, this is the definition of vocation. And I will forewarn you, I think I have 3 slides with a bunch of words on it like this one. And so the rest of the slides aren't quite this word heavy. But this is the definition of vocation according to the Catechism of the Catholic Church. And it's long, but it is beautiful. And so vocation is the calling or destiny that we have in this life and the hereafter. And God has created the human person to know God, to love and serve him. And the fulfillment of this vocation is eternal happiness. The vocation of the laity consists in seeking the kingdom of God by engaging in temporal affairs and directing them according to God's will. This is a great definition. It's beautiful. Obviously, it comes from the Catechism. But I have to admit to you that there is actually a definition that I like better, probably because it's easier to remember. And this definition comes, strange. There we go. What my slide wasn't advancing. This definition comes from a vocations director by the name of Adam Burns. And he said that he likes to think of the word vocation actually as a verb. And I like that because what he says, vocation comes from the word vocare, which is Latin meaning to call. But he says that vocation is actually our response to God's call. And I like that definition because that definition implies that we're actually listening to the voice of God. We're listening to him so that we can, in fact, respond. There is a Catholic author that you might be familiar with. She has written a couple of books. Her name is Sherry Waddell. Her first book is Forming Intentional Disciples, and then her second book is Fruitful Discipleship. And it's in this second book where Sherry Waddell says that Christian vocation is a mystery that emerges from a sustained encounter with Christ. Christian vocation is a mystery that emerges from a sustained encounter with Christ. And tonight, I just invite you to think a little bit about what does it mean to have a sustained encounter with Christ. being that we work in Catholic education, it's important for us to consider our vocation and to consider what a sustained encounter with Christ looks like. Now, a lot of people might say, well, it means we're disciples of Christ, right? That's what it means, that we should be living as disciples of Christ. But an important question for us to reflect upon, especially as we're about to start moving into the Advent season, is what does that look like for me during this season in my life? Because I admit to you, now that I'm older, my children are grown and they're starting families of their own. And so I often find myself saying, God, what does it mean for me now to live as a disciple of Christ? Because it's going to look different for me now than it did 20 years ago when we were busy raising our children. And so I think it's healthy and important for us to, at different intervals in our lives, pause and say, what does it look like for me to live as a disciple? Because our vocation will emerge from that. And so it's just something to kind of keep in mind as we're talking about our vocation tonight. Now, interestingly, the Catechism also says that there are 3 kinds of vocation. And our primary vocation comes to us from our baptism. And our primary vocation is actually to grow in holiness while spreading the gospel message. And the truth is, we could spend the whole night talking about this vocation, our primary vocation. But I think most people, when you hear the word vocation, I think most people, we typically think of the other 2 kinds of vocation, which are either our state in life, where we're religious or we're lay or we're single or we're married, or they think of the 3rd kind of vocation, which is the ministry or the occupation that we're involved in. And for us, that's Catholic education. But our primary vocation is our call to grow in holiness and to spread the gospel message. And I want to just take a few minutes, it won't be long, but I do want to take a few minutes to talk about how do we grow in our primary vocation, because interestingly, some of the things that we do to grow in our primary vocation are actually going to help us avoid burnout in our vocation as Catholic educators. And so how do we grow in our primary vocation? I think there's 3 steps, quite honestly. And step 1 is we grow in holiness through a commitment to daily prayer, through regular participation in the sacraments, and through the regular study and reading of Scripture. Tonight, what I want to really focus on, though, is this commitment to daily prayer. And I'll tell you, I've shared this presentation with faculty at Catholic schools and at national conferences. And I wonder at times, I honestly think, do I even need to talk about daily prayer when I'm talking with Catholic educators? Because I mean, they get it. They know that we should be committed to daily prayer. And yet I still am finding that it's important. And the reason is the reaction that I receive from Catholic educators. And I'm going to give you an example. When I'm in talking to schools and I'm in talking to the faculty, one of the things that I've said, which comes across as sort of alarming, but I say, because of the fact that we teach in a Catholic school, that brings with it a certain responsibility. And because there's a certain expectation that parents have when they're enrolling their child in a Catholic school. And so I mentioned to teachers, it is so important that we are rooted in daily prayer. This is step one in growing in our primary vocation. It's step one in living as a disciple. And Sherry Waddell, in her book, Fruitful Discipleship, makes another comment that I think is interesting. Sherry says that we will only bear fruit if we are living as disciples. We will only bear fruit if we are living as disciples. And so one of the things that I often say to Catholic teachers is, you know, if you're not committed to daily prayer, perhaps you should just stay home and not go into work and even consider a new line of work. And the reason is that if we will only bear fruit if we are living as disciples, and step one for living as a disciple is being committed to daily prayer. Well, if we're not committed to daily prayer, then we know we're not going to bear fruit, and our students and their families deserve better. We have to be committed to daily prayer. And the reaction that I've received from this when I'm in different schools has been interesting. There was one school where all of the teachers started to applaud. But then I was at another school, it was an inner city high school, and the person who had invited me to speak told me that the next day, two teachers approached him and said they felt that I was trying to shove God onto them by making this statement. And that's interesting to me. They teach at a Catholic school, but they don't want God. And then the reaction that's been most common that I've received from teachers are the ones who come up to me afterward and in private, and they say, "Thank you. I used to be committed to daily prayer, and then crisis struck, or this upheaval happened, or something turned my world upside down." And they say, and prayer fell by the wayside as we were just trying to keep our heads above water because of whatever the crisis was that unfolded in their family or at school or whatever. But then they say to me, it's been 6 months, or it's been a year, or it's been 18 months, and I think God is asking me to start again, to start anew with my commitment to daily prayer. And so I just want to invite you to really consider daily prayer. And the thing is I get it. It's hard. We are so mission driven in Catholic education. And the reality is we could work 24/7, and the work we're doing is for the Lord, and it is for the kids. And we give everything we have. But I want to share this story with you from Jim and Tammy Faye Baker. For those of you that are older like me, you will remember that they were very famous tele-evangelists in the 80s and the 90s. Tammy Faye Baker has since passed away, but they were super famous tele-evangelists until scandal erupted and Jim went to prison. Well, after he served his prison term, when he got out, he wrote a book, and the book is titled, "I Was Wrong." And in the book, he says, and I quote, "We were so focused on doing God's work that we forgot about God." And I don't know if you can relate to that, but I get it. You know, again, everything we're doing is for the mission, right? And we are serving the Lord and serving the families and serving one another and serving the kids. And we can do it 24/7 and still not give everything that needs to be given. But we have to remember to take time out every day, even if it's 10 minutes, for prayer. And your prayer life will look different than mine. you find through prayer, discern the way that God is asking you to pray. Maybe you're going to pray the rosary. Maybe you're going to do Lectio Divina. Maybe you're doing an hour of adoration every week. I don't know. It's maybe you use a devotional, whatever it is. Pray about how God is calling you to prayer. But I just want to invite you to practice that anew if for you it has fallen by the wayside. There was a priest, I was invited to speak at a conference in New Orleans last year, and I went to this priest's talk, and he was a young guy, 5 years ordained. He was from California. And he said something that I thought was so interesting that aligns with this. And what this priest said was, before he went to seminary, he worked as a youth minister. Then he felt called to the priesthood, so he went to seminary, he got ordained, and now he's serving as a chaplain in a Catholic high school. And one day he was driving into work, and he had to pull over to the side of the road because he was crying so hard. He couldn't see the road because he was crying. And he said, he cried out to God, and he said, God, I am a phenomenal youth minister. I am such a good youth minister, but I am a lousy disciple. Help me, Lord, to become a better disciple. And I just thought that's an important prayer. I know I need to pray on a regular basis. Okay, so step 2, how do we continue to grow in our primary vocation, which is to grow in holiness and to spread the gospel message? Well, step 2 is it's hard to spread the gospel message if you don't know it. And so it's interesting. I'm going to share a quick story with you, and then we're moving on, right? So I don't want you to think we're going to belabor the primary vocation too much longer. But a friend of mine, the thing about a lot of Catholics is, well, it's with anything, right? You don't know what you don't know. And those of us working in Catholic education actually know a lot more about the faith than people outside of the world of Catholic education. But a friend of mine, when I was earning my master's degree in theology, a friend of mine who is regular mass goer, she even volunteered as a catechist in our parish, she said to me one day, well, so you're getting a master's degree in theology? And I said, yeah. And she said, well, I mean, like, what do you do? Because, I mean, like, is there really even that much to learn? I didn't even know how to respond other than, yeah, there is a lot to learn. And so one of the things I just want to invite you, whether you have your doctorate in theology or you have no theology at all, please just be committed to being a continual learner about the faith. And maybe for Advent, you can make commitment to listen to one podcast on the faith, or read one book about a saint, or participate in a small group at your parish, or sign up for one Bible study, or whatever it is. But just make a commitment every year to be intentional about continuing to learn the faith. And then finally, we need to practice virtue. We try to instill virtue in our students, and we just want to make sure that we are developing a habit of virtue as well. So now, how do we grow in our vocation as educators? And again, I think there's 3 steps. And I would love to say that this is a very Trinitarian focus, and that's why I use 3 steps. The reality is I stick with 3 because my memory isn't what it once was, and yet I can remember 3 things. So the first is, I believe we grow as Catholic educators when we have a sense of humility and wonder. The humility is recognizing that whether we've been in the classroom or we've been in Catholic education for 30 years, or this is our first year in, we can always continue to learn. We can learn about our craft, and we can learn about the students that we encounter each and every day, because every year we have new students, and we want to approach them with this sense of wonder and to recognize that the students have new personalities. The new students come from different family backgrounds. They represent different cultures. They have different learning styles. They have different learning needs or gifts. And so we want to approach our students with this sense of wonder. We also want to have a sense of wonder when it comes to the content area that we are teaching. And no matter how many times we've taught the multiplication tables, or how many times we've taught verb conjugations in Spanish, or how many times we've taught those chemistry formulas, we really want to have that sense of wonder. And our students, they'll recognize if we're bored with it, well, they will be too. But if we can have that sense of awe and wonder, it will be contagious for them. I'm looking to see, I want to read something for you, and I didn't have it sitting in front of me right away, so I had to bend down to grab it. But G.K. Chesterton, in his book Orthodoxy, he says something that I think is interesting when it comes to this idea of wonder. And so I want to read for you what he says in Orthodoxy. G.K. Chesterton says, "The sun rises every morning. I do not rise every morning, but the variation is due not to my activity, but to my inaction." Now, to put the matter in a popular phrase, it might be true that the sun rises regularly because he never gets tired of rising. His routine might be due not to a lifelessness, but to a rush of life. The thing I mean can be seen, for instance, in children. When they find some game or joke that they specially enjoy, a child kicks his legs rhythmically through excess, not absence, of life. Because children have abounding vitality, and because they are in spirit fierce and free, therefore they want things repeated and unchanged. They always say, "Do it again." And the grown-up person does it again until he is nearly dead. For grown-up people are not strong enough to exult in monotony. But perhaps God is strong enough to exult in monotony. It is possible that God says every morning, "Do it again," to the sun, and every evening, "Do it again," to the moon. It may not be automatic necessity that makes all daisies alike. It may be that God makes every daisy separately, but has never got tired of making them. The repetition in nature may not be a mere recurrence. It may be a theatrical encore. I love that quote. It's a long one from Orthodoxy from G.K. Chesterton, because it gives me an idea of what wonder can look like. Have you ever wondered at the sunrise or the moon before with that kind of wonder, and appreciate that it might be a theatrical encore? How else do we grow as educators? I think it's with intention. First, we have to be intentional about getting professional development. depending on the school you work at, some schools have very structured and even robust professional development programs, and other schools have nothing. And many schools have things in between. I believe, though, that to be a good educator means we take on professional development ourselves. And so if you have a student in your classroom who has ADHD and you have not encountered this before, we need to take it on to learn how best to instruct that student. We need to take it on ourselves, and it's never been easier to do that. There are so many free webinars. You're doing that already tonight, right? There's webinars and there's podcasts and there's articles and there's books. And I mean, you could take graduate courses or advanced courses and you could get certifications, but whatever you choose to do, I just think it's really important that we continue to hone our craft, to continue to update whatever it is we need to know about teaching, whatever the content is that we are charged with teaching. But we also need to know how best to respond to the students that we have in our classroom each and every year. The other thing that I think we have to be intentional about is our own wellness. Andrew Pudewa is the founder of the Institute for Excellence in Writing. And he gave a keynote address at a conference years ago. And the title of his presentation was The 7 Keys to Great Teaching. And according to Andrew Pudewa, one of the keys to great teaching, he said, is that it's all about the teacher, not the student. So if any of you were starting to doze, or not pay attention, that probably caught your attention, because as teachers, all of the bells and whistles and red flags go up when you say, wait, what? It's all about the teacher, not the student. That's wrong. We're student-centered learning. We do differentiated instruction. We have personalized instruction, individualized instruction. We build relationships with the students. What are you talking about? It's all about the teacher and not the student. Well, Andrew Pudewa is a convert to the Catholic Church, and he understands the Catholic both and. And he would say, yes, it's all about the student. And it's about the teacher, because the reality is it doesn't matter how great the curriculum is. It doesn't matter how much professional development we have received. If we are so burned out, so depleted, and so exhausted that we have nothing left to give. We have to be intentional about taking care of ourselves. And when I do this presentation in person, I usually give a few minutes and I ask the people who come to talk to the people around them and share 2 or 3 ideas that they do to help maintain their own well-being, because I think it's helpful to get ideas from others. And so what we'll do is at the end, if people want to share ideas on what you do to help your own well-being, we can do that. But I also want to respect the people that need to get to bed or get kids in bed or still have some work to do around the house or grading or whatever. And so I'll keep moving. But I posed this question to a friend of mine. He has worked in Catholic education for more than 30 years. More than 20 of those years, he's been in leadership. And I said, Kevin, what do you do? How do you avoid burnout? And he said, Pam, it's easy. It's 4 things: prayer, sleep, exercise, and family. He said, prayer. I never miss a day. I pray every day. I need it. It grounds me and it keeps me stable. I thought that was so interesting, because if you'll remember at the beginning, we talked about what is step number 1 for living as a disciple and growing in our primary vocation. Well, it's a commitment to daily prayer. Interestingly, and social science research will confirm this, step 1 for making sure we avoid burnout is a commitment to prayer. And I'm sure you've heard about all of these studies. That's why people talk so much about, oh, we need to practice mindfulness and we need to practice meditation. And so it's prayer, right? And that helps us to avoid burnout. Sleep is important. I read a book recently, or a year and a half ago. It was a New York Times bestseller. I'm holding it up. I don't know if I'm too little for you to see it. It's called Why We Sleep by Dr. Matthew Walker. This is a fascinating read. It goes through everything that happens, all of the rejuvenation that takes place in our minds and our bodies while we are asleep. It is a fascinating read. Now, if you have a sleep disorder or anxiety around sleep, don't read this because it'll cause you more anxiety when you realize what rejuvenation and renewing is not taking place if you're not getting enough sleep. But sleep is so important. And so, set the task aside and get yourself to bed and pick up whatever you were going to do and do it in the morning instead. Exercise, we get this, right? We all know that it's important to eat healthy and to exercise. We know it. It's a different thing altogether to actually do it, but it does help. And then family. Dr. Ferdinand Kevin said, Pam, my family needs me and I need them. And it's so true. And it's so hard as Catholic educators when we're so mission driven and we could literally work from sun up till sundown and give and give and give. But we have to put some boundaries around our work so that we can spend time with our families. Our families need us, and we know that, and that can be depleting too. But we need them. We need our close friends. And so lean into these 4 things. We have to be intentional about taking care of ourselves. It's also important to consider Sabbath rest. Are we giving ourselves permission on the Lord's Day to not only worship the Lord and going to Mass, but to rest? Try not to use Sunday as your catch-up day and the day to run all of the errands and get all of the housework done. Give yourself permission to rest. And then finally, gratitude. I don't know, it was maybe 25 years ago when I first heard Oprah say how important it is to keep a gratitude journal. Well, I only started keeping a gratitude journal about a year and a half ago, not quite 2 years ago now. Even though I'd heard it over and over again, I never actually did it. Gosh, what a difference it makes when you begin or end your day, or begin and end your day, thinking of all of the things you're grateful for. That goes such a long way in changing our mindset and helping us to avoid burnout. Okay, the last thing, how do we grow as educators? It's with humility and wonder. It's with intention, and it's with joy. It was a lot of years ago. I can't even quite remember how many years ago it was now, when my children were still young and they were living at home. And I needed to go outside and take the dogs out for a short walk. And I was going to let my children know what I was doing. And it happened to be a day, and I live in Minnesota, and it really does get to be 30 below, and it really does stay 30 below sometimes for a week or weeks on end. We'll just have below zero temperatures on and on and on. And on this particular day, what it means when it's 30 below zero is you actually really do have to put boots and snow pants and a winter coat and a hat and scarf, because you can get frostbite in a matter of a minute. So I was getting all bundled up, and I said to the kids, I'm going to go outside and take the dogs for a walk with joy. I don't even know why I added the words with joy, but I did. And then it kind of became a little family joke. It just stuck. And so I would say to the kids, I'm going to go clean the bathroom with joy. Or I'm going to go fold the laundry with joy. And it just became something we started to say as a family. And one year for Mother's Day, one of my daughters gave me this. She made it. It says con alegría, and that's because I speak Spanish. I used to teach Spanish, and I would speak it around the home sometimes. And it's just a frame, and she had made it. And I used to keep this sitting on my desk at the school where I used to teach. And it served as a reminder to me that I can choose how I respond to the tasks that I have before me. I can look at the task and respond to it with procrastination or grumbling or complaining, or I can just move forward with joy. And so I would find myself saying little things like, okay, time to grade that huge stack of papers with joy. Time to go monitor the lunchroom with joy. Time to return that parent phone call with joy. And it's interesting because one year, just a handful of years ago, it was again nearing the end of the school year, and I was teaching seniors, and it was a Spanish class. And this particular senior, I think they had 2 more days of school left, and we ended the class about 2 minutes early. And the kids were kind of chit-chatting as they were gathering their things, waiting for the bell to ring. And this one particular student said to me, Dr. Patnode, how do you do it? And I said, Alicia, which was the name she chose for Spanish, but it's not her real name. So I'm not divulging any confidential information. But I said, Alicia, do what? And she said, Dr. Patnode, how do you do it? And I said, Alicia, what? Do what? And she said, Dr. Patnode, I've had you for 2 years now. And every class, you come in with so much energy and such enthusiasm day after day. How do you do it? I said, oh, Alicia, I fake it. And she looked at me and her eyes got this big around, and every kid in the class stopped talking and their jaws dropped. and I laughed and I said, no, Alicia, I said, I'm kidding. I said, no, the reality is I love what I do and I love all of you. It's your enthusiasm and your energy that's contagious for me. And I said, really, I love teaching. I couldn't have a job where I sit at a desk and stare at a computer all day long. I'd go crazy. I love teaching and I love all of you. Well, she was reassured, right, and felt better. And the bell rang and class ended. Now, can I say to all of you here tonight, are there times where I fake it? Yeah, we all do. And what I don't mean is some sort of superficial giddiness or silliness or anything like that. No, that's not what I'm talking about. We all have bad days. And we all carry crosses. And my high school students, they do too. They have bad days. They carry crosses. They get it. They're not looking for this fake giddiness. I'm not talking about this Pollyanna attitude. What I'm talking about is that every day, as I opened the door to the school, I made a conscious decision to leave the grumbling, the complaining, the gossip outside of the school, and to the best of my ability to choose joy. And the reality is that this is why. This is why our students are watching us, and our students need us. They need us to notice them. They need us to affirm their dignity and their value. They need us to teach them. They need us to love them. And they need us to be Christ to them. And what's so amazing is that what we won't know about are the times when our students are in the quiet of their own rooms. And this is the part, I swear, every time I tell this, it gets me emotional, but it's the times when our students are in the quiet of their own room and they're praying for us. What a gift it is to work in Catholic education. What a gift. And may we always treasure this gift and respond to this gift with humility and wonder, with intention and with joy. I thank all of you for your commitment to Catholic education, for your commitment to the students that you serve day in and day out. And I thank you for tuning in today. And I hope nobody's snoring, but we don't know because you've turned on the mute. But that's it. I thank you and God bless you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Patno. This was wonderful. And right now, I would invite anybody, if you have questions, feedback, anything you want to share, please go ahead, pop on screen, unmute. You also have the chat function, so whatever makes you comfortable.
And if you want to share something that you do to practice self-care and wellness, type that in the chat or unmute yourself. I'm trying to look here for my own chat so that I can see them. So.
Well, I know that for me, when I got to see your lecture a few weeks ago, it was perfect. Because I definitely needed a little bit of a of a boost. And it did, I've started saying around my house too, kids, I'm going to take out the trash with joy. They look at me like there's something wrong with me, but I'm hoping it catches on like it did at your house.
One of the things that I want to mention to you too, that is such a beautiful thing about being in Catholic education and this commitment to prayer. I do pray every day, and I will be praying for you. And I say that with such sincerity. I also have to tell people, I think I mentioned this at the conference and I didn't mention this now. It was 25 years ago when I made a commitment to start every day in prayer. And I wish I could tell you that now, literally 25 years later, day after day after day, every single day praying, I wish I could say, oh, it's so easy. It just comes so natural. It's so hard. It's so hard, especially when prayer feels dry, especially when it's inconvenient, especially when it feels like our prayers are not being heard. Please know I am praying for you, and I will continue to do so. And I say that with sincerity.
Had a one comment in the chat. Edna has to go pick up her daughter, but she says thank you, and she's off to do it with joy.
Fantastic. I appreciate that. Thank you. And honestly, I appreciate all of you because this was my first time doing this as a webinar. And so I hope I hope that it went okay for you and that it was of value. So thank you. It's hard when it's through technology, right? We're so blessed that we have it and we need it. But does anybody want to share something they do to help their own wellness? Maybe it's you have your special coffee every morning and that's how you treat yourself. What do you do just to give yourself a break or to treat yourself? Padre Pio calls it the weapon. You are protected when you pray the rosary. And boy, don't we need that protection in Catholic education today. One thing that I used to do, well, and I still do it now, it's just that it's with adult students. When I pray the rosary and when I used to be teaching at the high school, I would pray for my students and I would pray for each of them by name using the rosary. And with every bead, I would name a student and I could just visualize the classroom, and go through the students. And some years I'd have a lot of students because in the high school, you're having multiple classes, but that was a gift to me to pray. And so that's why I say I'm sincere when your name will be on my rosary beads. But I encourage all of you to do that too. If you're not praying the rosary and praying for your students by name, that is, beautiful. It's important for them to receive that prayer, but it's important for me too. I think I was a better teacher when I was more committed to praying for my students by name.
In the chat, I receive a daily reflection from Dynamic Catholic, and it is usually a vibrant picture of nature and a statement. Good way to start my prayer for the day. That's a great idea.
Amen. Thank you for sharing that. My husband gets those too. He is part of the Dynamic Catholic Club. I can't remember what it's called, but that's a great recommendation.
That is awesome. One thing I started doing with my kids, which is kind of funny, is we pick somebody to pray for in our family as we drive to school. We always say in Our Father, Hail Mary, and a Glory Be, and we've started just tagging somebody in the family, grandma, grandpa, whoever it is. And I don't know why but it's been nice, I think, to share that practice with the kids. And it was an easy way to do it, just to, like, start tagging family members. So we'll see if it sticks.
Oh, I think it's beautiful to teach our kids to be rooted in daily prayer. I think that's so important for kids, especially today. Our kids are in crisis, and there's so much despair. But if they know that they can pray and that God is there for them, that Christ is there for them, it can give them some hope. I think that's beautiful. And it doesn't have to be something super dramatic, right? You just are intentional to do it in the car. You're in the car, you've got the time. It's just being intentional. It's easy to do. And the lasting fruits of that will really be beautiful.
Thank you so much, Dr. Patnode, for being with us. This has been such a pleasure, and I'm so glad that we get to share your wonderful talk with more of our educators here in the Diocese of Arlington. And those of you who maybe don't know that much about Portal Charities, I invite you to go to our website, look at what we have going on. We have a lot of great resources for you, and we have some fun events coming up. We have a Christmas party coming up. That's always a good time, and the food is really good. I just have to say that. So anyway, we wish you could join us, Dr. Patnode. Feel free to come out to Virginia and join us for that. But thank you all so much, and I will go ahead and close out the session. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. God bless you all, and happy Thanksgiving next week.